Joining me now here on the Knicks Film School pregame show. Many of you made your opinions known when I went and got a Miami Heat lifer and a Knick hater for the last pregame podcast. And also the Knicks play another rival in another rival city, Boston, on Sunday night. And so I decided that rather than go get another Celtics content creator and another rival content creator, I went and got the next best thing, a member of the evil national media to talk about the Knicks. Thankfully, he is what some people I guess don't realize. He is also a Knicks fan, and he's one of my good friends, and he does exceptional work for Bleacher Report and the podcast Hardwood Knocks. Welcome back to the Knicks Film School Podcast, and for the first time to the Knicks Film School pregame show, Mr. Dan Favale. Dan, how you doing today, sir?
I am, after that uplifting intro, over the moon. That's how I'm doing right now. Thank you for the kind words, as always. I guess, did KFS listeners not like Giancarlo when you had him on, I'm assuming?
Man, so the funny thing, he kind of turned it on a bit. He called Jalen Brunson cute, which, like, credit to him after the game went the way it did last night. He just kind of sat there as like bring it on. Like, he had the surge gif and was just like standing there in the middle of the ring while people threw garbage at him. I was like, the Heat lost. I got to take it. You know, if I can't dish it, if I can't take it. And, you know, I respect people that can do that. I had Evan Roberts of WFAN, who's a huge Nets fan, on a couple months ago. And he brought up the fact that I like to take 10 seconds and laugh at the Nets. And it was right after the Brooklyn Nets had just kicked the Knicks' teeth in. Remember when the Brooklyn Nets had Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving? And so I just said, yeah, it's a beauty of sports. Whenever the Knicks lose to the Nets, take 10 seconds and laugh at the Knicks. I saw my face get passed around Nets Twitter. So Giancarlo had to kind of wear it last night. So thank you, Julius Randle, for making that possible. I am very curious what your perspective has been of all of this. And as somebody who's obviously in it, and as a Knicks fan, and the vibes being immaculate and whatnot, what I love about your coverage, because you have to cover all the teams, so you kind of get to see a landscape of all the vibes that exist. And the Knicks, their momentum has to be trending outside of New York and making waves nationally with what they're doing. A game out of the 4 seed, the best non-Milwaukee record since the trade deadline. How are you feeling about the Knicks right now?
Yeah. So the first part is, the people are nationally, I want to make that clear, not this podcast, not fans. They know there's been this look at the Knicks since the Josh Hart trade or whatever. The Knicks have the second best offense in the league since January 1st. They've been on this crescendo for pretty much half the season at this point, let's say. And the fact that it's flown under the radars is bizarre. And it took me a while, I think, to accept it more, because I'm just so inherently skeptical of this team because of how confusing the ride has been. And Julius Randle specifically is just I don't know, between him and RJ Barrett, I don't know if there are two players that I flip-flop more on in real time. And the Josh Hart trade, I was not a fan of in the moment. I was just well, why are you giving up this? It's going to be a first round pick for someone who's going to be a free agent that you have to pay, when clearly there wasn't this strong market for him. And then he's come in and been a shot of adrenaline, and you've been able to, limit some of the damage that RJ Barrett is doing when he's not having his good games. So that they're clearly, I was looking at them as a team that needed more of a 3-point shot of adrenaline, like a Gary Trent Jr. or someone who's going to come in and just chuck a bunch of threes. And he's just more so been exactly what the team needs when you're looking at sort of the guts and gall of what he does on the perimeter. I think the Knicks also, they've been 10th in 3-point attempt rate since January 1st. They're not shooting enough threes either. And so that's sort of kind of flown under the radar. It's that's really the two parts, is that it took me a while to just take this in and say, part of it is just there'll be nights where it's okay. I want to, as a fan, I want to watch this Knicks game, but I actually do need to go check in on Spurs Pacers is what I'm actually going to be watching. So maybe that also accounted for the slow burn. But when you ask the question of how good this team is, I said this on Hardwood Knocks the other day. They're a team that could legitimately, there's profanity on this podcast, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They're the team, I think more so than anyone else in the league, that could just fuck shit up in the playoffs, because like you're just not going to understand like, oh, they're going on this run. And it's, if you go into a series against Milwaukee or Boston, they're not going to be favorites against a bunch of people. But like if you go into a series against Milwaukee or Boston, I might have to do some pretzel twisting if I was to justify like how the Knicks are going to come out of that. After watching them against the Celtics, maybe it wouldn't be so much pretzel twisting. But like they could beat a Philly. They could beat a Cleveland. We just saw them beat like a Miami team, which has been, that was a playoff level game. And I think super encouraging. But like Miami's been like dog shit for a lot of this season. So I would just like, I view more of like these Boston games as a barometer for where the Knicks actually are, because I don't think the Heat are this serious team. But they still do have two superstars. So the Knicks are real. And I don't know what the cap is though on the ceiling of like these vibes, or of the ceiling of functionally where they're going to end up in like the Eastern Conference playoff picture, because I think there are only two teams I would definitively pick to beat them in a series in this moment. The last decade's been great. The ride's been really fun since basically the new year. But to be in that situation to where I thought they were going to be, I think we both smashed there over when we did our preview pod at Hardwood Knocks. Like I didn't see them being on like this pace now, especially given how the season started, when I wrote an article about how I thought the Knicks should fire Tom Thibodeau. And so to start there,
7 games in,
to end up here in March, it's been just a wild ride. But I don't think it's something where it's fleeting or an anomaly. I know I probably said this after the Julius Randle most improved season, only to see what happened after that. But there's something about this team, their relationship with one another, the steadiness that Jalen Brunson really just provides, like as someone who understands how to manage the game, but is also can be deferential to Julius Randle on nights when either Brunson doesn't have it going, or it's just like, hey, this is Julius's night. I can't say enough, as someone who also criticized, I have to make this clear before I throw it back to you, was never the money with Jalen Brunson with me. It was the mode of operations and just what I thought it said about the Knicks' long-term direction. I was clearly wrong. He has been my favorite player to watch on the team this season. And I think like even when he's not having his best nights, he's just so valuable to what they do, like the blend of speed and craft and vision that just sees through and over collapsing defenses. And again, the bandwidth to just fit in to whatever iteration the Knicks are that night. And I also think his job's a lot harder than maybe people on a national level credit, because the Knicks are not, like their invention is Jalen Brunson. Like they're not really that inventive of an offensive team when you look at the way they play. But what Jalen Brunson does with, again, his footwork, his speed, his angles, like that is their invention. And so like watching him play and just manage the game, I think he, even more so than Julius Randle, who, like, I'm not going to lie, like probably until he hit that shot against Miami, like I was probably still a Julius Randle skeptic at that point. But like a Jalen Brunson makes me feel good about this team. And so this is my long-winded way of saying, I don't know who the Knicks are going to face in the first round. But so long as it's not Milwaukee or Boston, like at this moment, even if it's a Philly, like there's a chance that I would pick them to win. And I feel like that's probably delusional a little bit. Like that's got to be the little phantom creeping up me there, but it's also got to be a harbinger of how far this team has come over the past couple of months.
I'm glad to hear someone else that looks at all the other teams and sees what this is. When I don't know if you listened to Doris Burke and Zach Lowe talk about the Knicks, but it finally clicked for me when Doris Burke pointed out, like, this reminds me of Memphis last year, that the Knicks like kind of, because like the Knicks have their offensive rating, like they're fourth right now in offense in the NBA, which is kind of nuts. And like we've been watching it grow as the season's gone along, where it's like, all right, the Knicks are a top 8 offense, the Knicks are top 7, top 6. And then you see like, oh, because they're great at offensive rebounding. Oh, it's because they're great at taking free throws. And you wonder how sustainable it's going to be in the playoffs. And like Memphis was fine in the playoffs, like they just like Ja got hurt, and that is the last comment I will make about Ja Morant, the Memphis Grizzlies on this podcast. Do you see this as sustainable to the point where not even like an Eastern Conference run is in play? Like with the Knicks sort of played against the Celtics, you would pick them, but like because the oldest player in this rotation is 28 years old, like the RJ thing is obviously a question, but you have the Quickly thing that's been great. And you have like Julius is like Jalen Brunson's 26 and Julius is still pretty young. Do the Knicks finally have something that you could see like, oh, this is a team we're going to hear about for a while?
Yeah, I think there's a bedrock here upon which they could build, where it felt like not that there was more of a haphazard search for a star before, but now if you take what Julius Randle's doing this season, just as that is Julius Randle's normal, and you know what Jalen Brunson is, like those are your building blocks. And it's, we look for stars who, yes, ideally one of them would be, you get a star who's better than both of them, but you also want that star to fit with them. It's not, we want to trade Julius Randle to get that star. We don't want to trade Jalen Brunson to get that star. My one hesitance in saying, could this be a team that we see for a while, is that windows in the NBA.
Hold on. Did you just see the breaking news that we both just saw?
Yeah.
We'll just acknowledge it. We just got the alert that Ja Morant has been suspended 2 games. That is the only thing we're going to say. At least 2 games by the Memphis Grizzlies. What do you want? I just don't know what the comment is. Like, I think what's going on is stuff that is kind of nuts, and I hope.
Yeah, it's harrowing, and to realize how long it's been going on too, and if the Grizzlies knew about it, and like it doesn't seem like they were taking this like laissez-faire approach to it, I don't understand. And some of the people doing the mental and social media gymnastics to defend Ja Morant at this point, it's like, why? Like, there's no I don't understand what is going on with him. And I think people should just check out what Bomani Jones had a thread on it, where it's like, oh, John needs to surround himself with better people. And as Bomani pointed out, it's been Ja who's been at the forefront of all these issues, not the people he's been with. So I also think, by the way, and I think it was because we don't know too much about the investigation, not a big enough deal was made about Ja Morant or someone in his car like pointing the laser at the Pacers. Like that would just seem like it kind of came and went. So yeah, Ja Morant suspended 2 games. That's fine because the Grizzlies are the biggest fraud in the NBA anyway, which is why that's why I don't love the comparison to like what the Knicks are doing, because one, this team has at least 2 people who can create in the half court, and the Grizzlies had 1 last year. They have Desmond Bane now, who's been fantastic. Like he's leveled up a ton. So I do get like sort of the impetus. I'm more interested when you look at how they go up against defenses. Boston's would be a good test, or Milwaukee's, or even like Cleveland's as well. And that might be the series. You might get the Donovan Mitchell Bowl in the first round, which would be compelling to say the least. Having 2 guys who can create something out of nothing and also hit difficult shots, it makes this team, to me, materially more lethal than they were during that Hawks series 2 years ago, because like that was just Randall. And it was just like, maybe you were hoping for something from RJ Barrett, but that was also too early on in his career. Now you kind of like know, or at least can't trust that he's ever going to be that player. And I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but you have like these 2 guys who create something out of nothing, and going ISO or mismatch hunting is now a viable course of your offense. And I think, not that I'd be more concerned, like I'm more interested to see like how they match up defensively with some of these teams who have a lot of these, like bigger wings in Boston, even in Milwaukee, having like the 2 big model in Cleveland, but then also like these 2 smaller guards who are so difficult to chase around. And I look at this team though, and there feels like there's a balance where if they wanted to, if they're willing to pay people, because Emmanuel Quickley's extension eligible, Josh Hart, he's going to be a free agent this season. We're going to start talking about Julius Randle's next deal pretty soon too. As if they're willing to pay, like there is something here to where even if you don't make a bigger swing on the trade market, you can justify keeping it together and see room for growth from here. And the growth can come. But I don't know that they were at this point before. It was independent of making that big trade, because you mentioned like the ages of the guys on this team, and there's still these swing pieces where it's, well, what is Quentin Grimes going to be? Even if you're pretty low on RJ Barrett, there's like the Emmanuel Quickley season. And I mentioned this, I haven't dug into my awards too deeply just yet. I don't know how he is not by the betting odds or even like during the discussions. And Knicks Twitter, yes, I'm pretty plugged into Knicks Twitter, so I know that there's a 6 man of the year case mounting for Emmanuel Quickley. But just like in general, how he wasn't routinely mentioned among the top 3 candidates, let's even say, like so much attention has been basically paid to Norman Powell and Malcolm Brogdon. And
Russell Westbrook, by the way, who was the favorite until he got traded from the Lakers,
which that's just proof that like betting odds can be disconnected from reality. And but like to have someone like Emmanuel Quickley is a perfect example, like just this swing piece, which his defense, which is wild that like his defensive improvement has been great, but like that was not the player he was billed as, like being on the Knicks. And when you look at what he was as his rookie year to now, but he's still someone who could like really be a microwave guy on offense as well. So to have that two-way juice, it's a roundabout way of saying like it feels like there's something sustainable here, and they have the ability to augment it again without taking these massive swings where it's like, okay, you get a Josh Hart and look at how much better or more sensible it feels like they're playing. And that's like a pretty big win, because there's still going to be people, fans, media, they're like, well, they need the guy who's better than Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. I would tend to agree, but they're also just at a point where it's like, if you tread water and futz and fiddle on the margins, like you can also be a measurably better team. And I think that's what we're seeing now with the Josh Hart trade, which again, I was just completely wrong about. Like I didn't necessarily see his value, and I didn't necessarily understand the logic. I thought it was more innocuous than hurtful, but I just wasn't a fan of it. And I mean, that's why, it's a good thing I don't run the Knicks.
Well, I gotta be honest. Now we're at the point where like I'm glad a lot of people don't run the Knicks. Leon Rose, the 180 that this season has done, the two moves that he made, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, have really contributed to. And honestly, the third move, not trading Julius Randle, like we all stupidly wanted them to do, is like those are the moves that have led to what this team is now. Not trading Emmanuel Quickley, even though it was very clear by the reporting they were looking at offers. Real
Same
quick.
season stuff too. This is even like Julius Randle in the offseason.
This was like, earlier in the year. Yeah, yes.
Just so, and like now we're here, it's like, well, how much is Emmanuel Quickley going to, they have to pay Emmanuel Quickley. Is he going to win 6 man? If he wins 6 man of the year, like that's just like,
what's the number that you think he could get to? Someone asked me, we doing the playback watch party last night, and one of our contributors, XJ, was like, what if he were to get offered like 110? Like, would that be crazy? Especially with like, remember the cap's going up, like Duncan Robinson's making $90 million. So like, is it that crazy that Emmanuel Quickley, who does more than just shoot, and does like all the intangibles, is an elite defender, might win 6 man of the year? Is that crazy to say like 4-1? I've said 480 for a while. Then it was like, okay, 485 as his like impact continues to go up,
I think people are going to have to get used to like 480, like something to 490. Like that's what the fourth, fifth best player on a team is going to start making with the cap going up. I will, however, say if I'm the Knicks and you're entering like 110, or even 4 of 100, like, all right, well, we'll just let this roll to restricted free agency then. Like you go out and find the offer and we'll just match it.
Fair. Well, that's the hope then, is that if you were to go out and get an offer, although you don't want an Ayton situation, I guess that really hasn't hurt them, the Ayton situation.
You can handle it different. I mean, I guess the Knicks, I was about to say, you could handle it differently by not dangling your premier restricted free agent and all these trade talks, but like they've already done that with Emmanuel Quickley.
That's true.
Before.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that might not force them, but maybe they'd be more inclined to pay a premium because of how like he was readily available and like all these different trade talks. But I haven't even thought about his number, but I would think at this point, especially if he wins 6 man of the year, like there will be a team that I think I think we devalue point of attack defense because we just assume that players who are operating from that position on offense are usually going to be so good it doesn't matter. It's still really hard to find defenders who can hold up in those situations, who can navigate screens like Emmanuel Quickley can, and to also have just at best, like, yeah, he can be a wild card on offense, but an ultra distant 3-point shooter and someone who can hit these like on a whim shots in the lane. That if he hit the open market this summer, the restricted free agent market this summer, given his age too, where rebuilding teams can talk themselves into him as well, I would guess that he would get an offer sheet that's 4 of 110, if not more. Like I would guess that money would be out there for him.
RJ Barrett got his extension this offseason, and we can get into like the complications of like whether it was just like a chess piece being moved.
I defended
during
that.
During the Donovan Mitchell.
It's
not even like defending the contract. It's like that was a move made by Leon to be like, all right, I'm taking RJ off the table from Donovan Mitchell sweepstakes. Now we still have the best offer. And that's when Danny Ainge was like, all right, screw this. Cleveland, what do you want to do? But like RJ has not been as valuable to this team as Emmanuel Quickley. RJ stands I'm not saying he sucks. I'm not saying he's bad. I'm just saying Emmanuel Quickley has been more important to the Knicks this season. And I look at the number he got. Now he's coming from the 3rd pick in the draft and Quickley's coming from the 25th pick in the draft. So the number would be different what his extension is. I'm wondering if we need to start really thinking differently about what it's going to take to keep him. And honestly, whether it even matters, because it's worth it, because he's that valuable to what they're doing. Speaking of RJ Barrett, I do want to give you the floor a little bit as someone who defended that contract. And I want to say he's the player you and I have talked about the most when we've talked about the Knicks over the years. It hasn't been a leap up. It's either been a sidestep or a step back this season. How are you feeling about this player? And do you think there is a step forward in his future?
I do not feel great about this player. And I think that there is, with the way that the Knicks are built right now and the talent that has proved itself in front of him to this point, I don't know how he gets to that step forward unless he just like fundamentally changes his game. And we've seen him defend better than this. So it's like, you have that in him, but can he be, this feels someone where if you're going to have Jalen Brunson, if you're going to have Julius Randle, like it's pretty clear that RJ Barrett needs to be more like 3-and-D, then he's not going to get these on ball reps, or we can we prioritize RJ Barrett plus these bench units? If you want RJ Barrett to plumb the depths of his ball handling, his attack mode, like are we going to get to a point where we need to have a discussion about, well, maybe he's just your sixth man? Like he's the guy who's actually coming off the bench at that point. I honestly don't know what to feel about him. I vacillated between like, okay, you need to like hold your stock, and well, how many picks plus RJ Barrett get you Mikal Bridges over the summer? It's like that, like those are the wild swings that I'm on, which is just, I mean, typical for like this Knicks team has been such a trip, but I don't know how to feel about RJ Barrett anymore. I will say, I think when we were speaking about the Donovan Mitchell trade, I was pretty bullish by saying, yeah, you don't want to trade him in the Donovan Mitchell trade because you want to acquire the star to play with RJ Barrett. That was a version of me that was much lower on Julius Randle, while also being much higher on RJ Barrett. And those two have sort of flip-flopped. I would be, if there was a concern level for this season, I think I'd be at like a hard 7.2 if we're going between 1 and 10. It's like we're talking about year 4, and we're still talking about the same issues. We are entering, though, like, aren't we getting to the point, or we're kind of past it, which is concerning. We're supposed to be at the point of the season where like, oh, RJ Barrett's really coming on, and like we just really haven't gotten there. And I'm very interested to see how we've already seen it impact his playing time, but like the Josh Hart trade and the rise of Emmanuel quickly, like, are we just going to see these like super high leverage moments in the playoffs where RJ Barrett is not on the floor? And that's going to prompt, you just gave this guy an extension. That's going to prompt some, I would think, necessary, but also very awkward conversations.
It is. And while I agree that the concern in a vacuum about the player is like a 7 out of 10 or just above a 7 out of 10, right? As far as the team, and like that's, I think, what the Josh Hart trade meant, that a lot of people, myself honestly included, didn't realize when it was made. Like I thought he would take Deuce McBride's minutes, which was like 8 to 9 minutes a game, and then he would bleed into some Quentin Grimes minutes, because like secretly, since the Josh Hart trade, Quentin Grimes has been shooting like over 45% from 3. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that he's no longer asked to be like Bruce Bowen or Mikal Bridges, like be the defensive stopper of the other team's best player for 40 minutes. Oh, by the way, you also have to hit every 3 that you just get in spot up duty. Now, because the offense is flowing a little more, and he's only playing like 22 to 25 minutes, he's not gassed for these big shots, and his shooting has gone up. But like Hart would bleed into those minutes. And then like this is what the new version of the Knicks, I think, is kind of showed us, is like you said, against these wings, like a Jason Tatum, like a Jaylen Brown, honestly, last night, like a Jimmy Butler. You have multiple looks to throw at them, like quickly, like Hart, like RJ, like Grimes, and you have options. And that, I think, with RJ, like if he doesn't play in crunch time, and because he's not playing well, it's okay. Like you revisit we gave you an extension. Do we upgrade your spot on the roster in the off season? And as of right now, what's working is this Josh Hart thing. And I do think that you mentioned Gary Trent Jr. That might have actually catered to a need a need that they need to fill is shooting. I'll add Josh Hart shooting like 60% from 3, not sustainable. It's just been nuts to see it since he's got here. like what they did this summer with Jalen Brunson, it was very much like, oh, Leon's godson, like the family nature of it. Oh, Josh Hart, like you mentioned, Mikal Bridges, like, oh, we're getting the Villanova trio back together. Like that seems to be the thing that they've built. And you can't quantify it. You can't really, like, there's no stat on cleaning the glass for like these people like each other, like the chemistry stat. But that just seems to be like what they've built here. And
the hug that Jalen Brunson gave Julius Randle post game against the Heat is just like that. And it was so long. And I'm just watching then Julius Randle's quote of, we really love each other, which was interesting. I think that brought up the fan base and myself, like, kind of turned on Julius Randle last year. I do think he earned it. I want to make that clear. But like the team never seemed like they were out on Julius Randle.
Necessary correction. It's not so much that he earned it. His play earned criticism. And you didn't go as far as some people might have gone with Julius Randle.
Yeah, I'm just assuming that actual humans aren't like like, oh, he's not having a good year of basketball. This is the worst human being alive and like doesn't deserve to have, an actual life. So whenever a player is playing that poorly, it makes you wonder if something's happening off the court. And so like that element is tough to criticize, but he earned the criticism. Like, and he earned the fans becoming disenchanted with the way that he was playing. But yeah, if you could quantify the vibes for this team or the camaraderie of this team, and look, maybe part of it is just like, look at Evan Fournier, Derrick Rose, everyone but Cam Reddish, who was pulled from the rotation, even RJ right now, seeing his minutes get cut. Like, we're not hearing like rumblings of, and I get they're winning, so it's hard to hear them, but as soon as they made the swap, like even Derrick Rose and Evan Fournier, like, yeah, we want to play. But like, they're not malcontents either on the roster. Like, I do think that says something about the locker room. And so, but to see like the joy with which, and the factor's just been up since Josh Hart came. Like, I don't know if it's just because like him and Jalen Brunson, like I'm feeling that, but it's special the connectivity of this team that seems like they have off the basketball floor. It's sort of like, let's use Blink-182 as an analogy. Anyone who knows me knows that I love Blink-182. Part of their appeal was always that it wasn't a band. It was because they were best friends, and that improved the experience. I think for me, a lot of the times when I was watching teams growing up, you wanted to believe that these guys weren't just coworkers. They like each other too. And there's even now, as a childish adult, like watching, there's an element of me that still wants to believe that. And some of these teams that are like, that's why I do enjoy like the Warriors. Like there's more of like a familial touch there with that core. And also just how long those three stars have been together is just unheard of at this point, where it's more, let's look at the Clippers or even let's use the Nets as the one that just blew up. Everything felt so transactional and business-like there. This team doesn't feel like that, even though I think that maybe even I made the argument that everything just felt so sort of incoherent for them leading into the season. And so to see this level of connectivity, it improves the experience tenfold. I think what also improves it for fans is look at what you just sat through last year. And to get to this point, like the fans deserve every bit of this, but to also sort of just see where this team is emotionally and like, yes, on the basketball court, but outside of basketball, I think that enhances the experience for sure. And maybe I'm the only one that looked at their favorite bands that way, but it was like, you wanted to believe that they were all friends. And so like the fact that part of the origin story for this Knicks team is they're doing things off the court, or that Julius Randle's son is just like a staple on these videos and his reactions, to feel that type of deep rooted connection that has something to do with the game, but it has nothing to do with the game. It's super cool. And I think it helps, but I also think it makes, whether you're an impartial or observer or like a diehard fan, I think it makes the experience that much cooler.
It does. And like the 2 years ago team that like the We Here season, that was also the Big 15 season that like the Nets had their big three, and then Julius Randle were like, we don't have a big three, we have a Big 15, and that's always gonna win that. I think it was actually Reggie Bullock who coined that, but that it's easier to get buy-in from everybody and some sacrifices that need to be made when they're winning. And I think that's what's cured, like just break it down simply, like that's what's made this season, like all the things you mentioned, Derrick Rose leaving the rotation, potentially like for good, like an NBA rotation for good. Evan Fournier, who like has shown like in spurts, like the shooting's still there, but he's out of the rotation. Hasn't said a peep. Just been a consummate professional, been a veteran for a lot of these younger guys. Like Obi Toppin would probably like to be playing more minutes than he is as a backup
that's
role.
a great example. Yeah.
You know, like Emmanuel Quickley should probably be a starting two or maybe in a one in the NBA. And he's been an elite sixth man. And because, and like to RJ's credit, his role has taken a step back. And I think this is the one thing that's been fascinating to watch is everybody's trying to pay attention to RJ as like he sits during crunch time a few times and sees his minutes go from like 38, 39 to like 27, 28 minutes. And he's been like, we're winning. Like, who wouldn't want this? And that I think is what's been so cool is that all the sacrifices for the better of the team and for the better of the whole, like they're being made with pleasure. And that's like, we're all kind of buying into it as a result. This has been great, Dan Favale. And I had a Celtics question. I think I kind of asked it back in the very beginning of the pod of like, as far as like, what do you think of the Celtics? As far as this matchup goes with the Knicks, I wanted to go outside of the individual matchup bubble and get someone nationally to talk to, which is why obviously you're great and you came on. Who's your pick out of the East then? If it's the Celtics, great. If it's not the Celtics, then who?
I have Milwaukee. So
okay.
Milwaukee never were my preseason picks, and I would stick with. I was feeling a little rickety about Milwaukee for a while, but I'm feeling pretty good about them at the moment.
Okay, where do you see? Do you see a Celtics Milwaukee conference final?
I feel like it should play out that way, but the Celtics, they just made the finals and they're so deep and they're so good, but like there's a variability to how they play on offense where they go through like these turnover spurts, or because you can be so reliant on jump shooting, there's that inherent variability there. And I'll look at like Derek White, like flame throwing from the perimeter. I'm like, is this really going to continue to happen? And like the offense has been like iffy for them over the past month or so too. I don't want to say I don't trust them. It should shake out that way, but they kind of feel beatable, which just doesn't make sense. And I think like they're the only team that ranks in the top 5 of offense and defense. So if I had to pick, I'd say Bucks and Celtics. I do feel more at this point though, better about the Bucks going chalk than I do about the Celtics. Like they just feel, even if their depth is better, and it is better, they just, for some reason, they feel more vulnerable, or maybe it's again, just the variance and where people talk about the Bucks offense and all the flaws about it. Like they're consistent with their flaws. Mm-hmm. And they've proven that it doesn't matter in the past. We've seen the Celtics kind of get in their own way with turnovers last year in the finals for sure. But even just, we've seen it now. Like Jason Tatum will go through these outside shooting slumps. And I think he's a much better player. He's diversified his portfolio to the point where he doesn't have to be as reliant on those looks. But this is a team that has a higher variability in their performance, I think, than a team like the Bucks does.
I will let you have one more chance to clarify and correct yourself. You really meant that the Knicks are going to be the team that represents.
I was just like, I didn't even want to say who do I have coming out. The Knicks are going to come out of the East. That's who I'll be rooting for to come out of the East.
Yes, and I gotta be honest, like the Bucks are the one team because I haven't seen them lose a game since June. Like the Jets were playing the last time the Bucks had lost the game. But man, there's like nobody that scares me. And maybe after the Celtics game that'll change and I'll recontextualize. Like it's funny. 2 years ago when they had a 9-game winning streak and they played the Suns and they finally lost, it was like, okay, this is what it looks like when they lose. I can now get used to like Josh. They're not going to have an 82 win pace with Josh Hart anymore. Maybe that will be like the breath of fresh air we need before this approaches. Because after that they play Charlotte. If they beat the Celtics, that means 9 straight. Then they play Charlotte, that's 10 straight. And then I will become, as Mensa puts it, a parody account of what the Knicks are, you know, and just like they're not just going to win the title in the NBA. They're probably going to go play baseball this summer and win that. They're probably going to help the Rangers inadvertently win a title this year. They're going to win the Cup, the Larry O'Brien and the World Series trophy this year. And then as a result, Aaron Rodgers is going to force his way to New York and the Jets will win the title too. You know, all of the Ducks will align.
Do you have the Knicks? Do you have the Knicks winning? If the matchup right now was Cleveland, New York, are you picking New York to beat Cleveland?
Knicks in 6. Give me that. Come on.
Okay. Just care.
Yes. I will say I'm more afraid of the the Cavs and Sixers, like in all seriousness, than some Knicks fans are. They've just, every time they've played a healthy Cleveland team this year, they have matched up perfectly. They're 2-1 against the Cavs this year. The game that they played in Cleveland and lost, they were up going into that fourth quarter by like double figures, and then like the old rotation lost. So I like the Knicks' chances with the matchup there. Also, we are a year removed from Jalen Brunson and a Luka-less Mavericks ending the Donovan Mitchell Jazz run. And like, I know a
little bit different than that Jazz team.
It is. You're right. But like someone who as far as like, am I afraid of Donovan Mitchell? If I were Donovan Mitchell, I'd be afraid of Jalen Brunson, like that's a matchup.
Jalen Brunson might have scared Donovan Mitchell into trying on defense again, because that's what's happened this season. So yeah. Jalen Brunson might have single-handedly salvaged Donovan Mitchell's defensive motor.
Well, I like the Knicks in that series, at least to, again, maybe not as arrogantly to pick the Knicks in that series. I
don't think that would be arrogant. I
think it's honestly closer to 50-50 than people realize. And maybe actually I would, if the Knicks end up with the 4 seed specifically, then I'd absolutely pick them to win that series. This
is probably just anti-James Harden propaganda. I'd probably feel more confident in Knicks beating Philly than Cleveland for some reason. And that just goes against like all the vitals that Philly has shown. But and maybe I've watched too much Philly lately, because like they've seen their past few losses. But yeah, I mean, the East playoffs at the top are such a gauntlet. Like being the 4 or the 5 seed, to where, okay, you have to, if you're the Knicks, you have to play Cleveland, and then you're probably going to have to play Boston or Philly, and then probably just have to play Milwaukee if you somehow won. That would just be an absolutely brutal one. But I'm happy we're at a point where we're talking about, can the Knicks win a playoff series? Because I don't even know, like that was not the discussion we were having coming into the regular season.
I wondered who was still going to be here at the deadline, and the only one that wasn't here after the deadline was Cam Reddish, and it ended up being
Ryan Arcidiacono.
I apologize.
Right,
sorry, Sophie Mihailuk, that I didn't recognize why you're not here anymore. The only none of them were in the rotation. The fact that this team was able to turn non-rotation pieces into an important rotation piece to upgrade and help them for a playoff run is the best possible scenario that the season could have played out. And look, Josh Hart is 27 years old. I think tomorrow, when people are hearing this, he will be 28. His birthday is on Monday. So that's the oldest person in rotation, him and Julius Randle. This is something that is just the beginning, it feels like. And
Julius Randle being under the age of 34 is absolutely wild. It feels like he's had 8 different careers, and he's only 28.
You want to know why that is? It's because he's had 8 different careers. He was the last guy on the Kobe teams, and then those weird Luke Walton Lakers, and then that last year,
the gap year in the Pelicans.
Right, the gap year with the Pelicans, then the consolation prize when Katie and Kyrie went to Brooklyn, and then the we here, then the last year, and then the we back seasons. Yeah, he's very much he could write 8 different books on like my year in the NBA. It's very much a yearbook thing with Julius Randle. Dan Favale, you've been outstanding with your time. Please tell everybody where they can find you, Hardwood Knocks, and all of the work that you do covering the NBA.
Yeah, check out Hardwood Knocks, which covers the league at large. It's spelled exactly as it sounds, at Hardwood Knocks on Twitter. You can find all our stuff there. And you can find me on Twitter, just my name, which is on the screen if you're watching, but it's at Dan Favale, Favale, always tweeting nonsense.
Yes. Dan, always good to see you, my man.
You too, Claudio. Take care.